There are a few concepts in IFC schema that you have to understand, and then it gets much easier. So the first thing that you have to separate is the schema on the one side and the file on the other side. And that's the first part. So you have an IFC file that has a certain structure. So it's an IFC project, and then you have all the entities in there. But that's quite easy to understand normally. So you have something like a container where everything is stored in, and then you have objects that you want to plan or you want to organize. And there are only two things that you need for organizing or managing this object. It's a class, so you have to know what it is. Is it a wall? Is it a window? Is it a process? And mostly a GUID, an ID. And everything else is optional. That's the interesting part. You don't need to structure everything. You can just push everything in an IFC file and you get it out eventually. Everything else, how you organize it, is optional. So you can put buildings inside. You can define buildings, you can define stories, and then you can link all your elements to stories. You don't need geometry in there. That's optional. You don't need a location. So everything you can, or mostly everything you can do in an Excel spreadsheet, you can do in IFC, in an IFC file. It's just a list, a structured list. Yeah, and then you define relationships between those elements. You can define one or many geometries. So every object can have as many geometries as you like. If it's a footprint, if it's a boundary box, if it's center of gravity, and so on, an axis, just an analytical representation. So you can have the wall as a rectangle and extrusion, and you can have a rectangle as a footprint. For floor plans, you can have the axis, and for structural analysis, you have just a plane. But that's optional. You don't need any of this, but you can also have all of them. So that's the interesting part, I think. You just define what you know. And if you compare this to BIM authoring software, you have to define a lot of things just to make these objects existing. You cannot say, okay, I have 20 rooms in my model, in my project. You have to model them to make them, put them into virtual existence. In IFC, you just write, okay, you make 20 lines, and each is a space, and you're done.